Cheers, brother.
Cheers, mate.
Mate, just wrapped up a big day on the trails. Now, I want you to tell us a bit about the brakes you've been running on your bike. They're the first from the Italian brand Braking. We've done a little intro video on those brakes there, mate.
Yep.
Those things definitely grabbing some attention. I mean, even when we were out there today, a couple of people were asking about what they were, never seen them before. So you can start a bit of an overview about them. Obviously, pure, like premium quality brake, big upgrade.
Yep.
But yeah, tell us a bit about the brakes.
Yeah, so like, as you just touched on, and as we've touched on with previous intro piece on them, they're a super unique, high quality braking system from Braking F.I.R.S.T, which is an Italian company. So all CNC machined. The ones that I tested were the big single piston ones.
Yep.
So they're made and marketed everything from a XC bike and up to some downhill bikes and that as well. So I run them on my enduro bike, and I took them overseas for a couple of weeks. And
we'll touch on that. Super versatile. One of the things when we were first approached, so the distro over here in Australia is Vertigo Sports. They sent us a set of the brakes. Now, the other cool thing about the brakes, which we'll get onto, is the pads and the aftermarket rotors. They're really cool as well. Quite a unique design. But mate, they reached out and said, hey, you keen to review some brakes? And I was like, well, took a look at them. Mate, as soon as I saw those levers, those things are crazy amount of machining.
Yeah.
Fully handmade in Italy as well, right? And so produced, hand put together in Italy. Man, when you think of Ferraris and the Ducatis and whatnot of the world.
Yeah, looking like,
seriously,
everyone wants like something a little bit boutique with their bikes. And, to be honest, like there's obviously a lot of good mainstream companies which are making excellent brakes, but there's some very unique companies making some pretty trick bits of kit, and these guys are no different. So full CNC machine calipers, CNC machine levers, reservoir, and fully braided lines and that as well. So
that's
really good.
One thing I noticed, obviously the gold color really stands out. The thing I found really interesting, like moving past the lever, which looks epic, is those calipers, man. They are massive, oversized, but they're two piston, aren't they? Single piston inside.
Single piston, yep. So which was a bit interesting, but I probably segues nicely into the next set of brakes we're going to test anyway.
That's right. Yeah, we've actually got another. If you're digging this review, you're keen to learn more about the Italian brand Braking, we're actually about to dive into that 4-piston setup as well. So it'll be really interesting. Bit of a back-to-back. Scotty, in the first video that you did the intro piece on these brakes, which we'll put a link below. You mentioned you're about to head off to Whistler. Now, you took a set of SRAM codes off your bike to put these on.
Correct.
Because you'd ridden these brakes for a couple of weeks before you went. Mate, that's a pretty big move. Whistler, big long days, you were there a couple of weeks.
Yeah, to be honest, a little bit. I mean, I've always been a fan of SRAM brakes. I really like them. I've pretty much run them SRAM brakes on all my bikes. So I was a bit apprehensive about obviously taking a very reliable braking system off to, put on my bike for a couple of weeks with a bit of a risk.
But what about the perfect reviewing conditions though, right?
100%.
Like to dive right in the deep end.
I thought, here's like, let's put them on, let's have a crack, and let's actually see how well these brakes stack up on the big slopes of Whistler, BC.
Well, man, let's dive straight into it. How are they? Because obviously, when you consider Whistler, chances are the runs are going to be much longer. Like you got like 20-minute runs, pretty much standard.
Yep.
And you're probably doing a dozen laps a day or whatever. So the fatigue and like the amount of wear and tear that it's gone through a brake system, the amount of heat that's gone through a brake system, how did they hold up?
Two things I really liked about these brakes. They were initially a little bit finicky to set up and like get right, but however, we'll touch on that soon because there's plenty of adjustability in these. However, the two things I really noticed is they're very light under the lever feel. So they've got plenty of modulation. They feel really good, especially when you're braking for extended periods of time.
Yeah, how is that for the hand, like arm pump? Yeah, right, okay.
Unreal. So that's one thing I noticed is like, they're very good at managing fatigue, especially for a lot of downhilling. The other thing I noticed was they remain pretty bloody consistent. So some of the brakes might chop and change and feel a little bit different when they're getting a lot of heat.
That bite position on your feel changed a lot from top of the
mate,
to the bottom.
We rode top of the world to the bottom, which 30-minute plus downhill run, and they felt the same at the top as they did at the bottom.
Unreal. Yeah. Those braided lines too, that would certainly help there. But I guess the fact that the calipers, everything's so oversized, there's a lot of fluid.
Yep.
Now, speaking of fluid, dot or mineral?
Dot fluid.
Dot, okay, cool, that makes sense.
Yep.
Well, and the other thing to keep in mind too with braking, really deep roots in the moto side.
Yes.
So obviously dot is well, everywhere in moto. Mate, let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned before the adjustability of the things. Now, one thing you mentioned in the review, if you check out the latest copy of the mag, is that the levers don't have like a bunch of little dials and bits and pieces, right? It's real like, you got to get your Allen keys out to set them up, set and forget, so to speak. But yeah, run us through kind of some of this initial setup and those adjustments that the
so
brakes
like you
offer.
can pretty much adjust like your modulation, your reach, like how far your lever comes in on the pull. So like there's so many little ways you can adjust these brakes to get them absolutely perfect. Even down to the caliper, they've got these little grub screws so you can actually push them in or push them out to actually get your caliper and like center of your rotor dialed as well. So
I've never heard that before.
Dude, like, so not just at the lever, they've got like adjustment at the caliper as well. So
wow, that's some serious engineering on these things, hey?
yes, so but like so to get them dialed was a little bit, you know, a little bit of playing around.
Initial setup, you mean?
Correct.
Okay.
But and one thing, you know, not to say anything negative about them, like one thing I do like about some other braking brands is the ability to adjust things on the trail. So I did find a couple of times, you know, out on the trail that I actually had to get like a 2mm Allen key out to make those adjustments. That's probably one thing I probably didn't find that user friendly. However, with all those adjustment points they're going to make the brake pretty heavy if they have all those knobs on the brakes as well.
And that's one thing I noticed when they arrived in the box, like obviously I brought them down, they arrived at the office at my desk and I was having a good look. They are bloody light. Like when you were saying you're going to take them to Whistler, I was like, man, aren't they like I just assumed they're a full-blown cross-country brake, albeit they've got a massive caliper. But they're really not. They're designed or developed to obviously be quite
they're
friendly towards
right
gravity.
Up to be, they're definitely like a gravity brake, but they're marketed right up towards like a downhill bike. Would I put them on the single pistons on a downhill bike? Probably not.
It's not really what they're intended for though.
Not really.
And again, going back to the weight of them, you know what I mean?
But for a long, like, you know, big rotors, the rotors themselves are like dynamite. The way the rotors are designed to disperse heat, like everything about these brakes, like the rotors, the caliper, the adjustment, the lever, like they really are Mickey Mouse. Even setting them up and like having to change the lines and put them all together was like super user friendly. It was really, really easy. But you could also see the detail that's gone into these as well. But would have put them on a downer bike? Probably not. But then again, that's probably why they got the 4-piston brakes.
Well, exactly. That makes a lot of sense. And it'll be interesting to find out that comparison. One thing that chatting to the boys down there at Vertigo, one thing they sell a lot of, obviously you've got complete brake sets that you can have as like a massive upgrade for your bike, but they're selling a lot of the rotors. The word's getting around town of how good the performance of those things is. Now, not only do they look Mickey Mouse, you'll see in some of the imagery overlaid over this video, of course, but essentially the rotor is a crazy design. Like obviously the center's all machine, but the actual face of the rotor, the braking face, has like, it's risen up, isn't it? Those black areas.
And there's gaps in the actual braking surface again to like, so it's not just one big surface, and it's designed obviously to give your pad and rotor a break, more ventilation through the rotor as well. So
ventilation, but I've also read that it's designed to hold that optimum braking temp, because as we've learned, brakes don't work when they're cold and brakes don't work when they're crazy hot. The optimum is in the middle there, and so they're designed to stay in that sweet spot.
100%. You see a lot of that in Formula One. You see a lot of that in, you know, on the motos, and obviously the MotoGP and superbikes and that as well. Like that's exactly, you know, the way their rotors and that are designed is for that optimum braking temperature.
Which makes, again, calling back to the heritage of braking Italian brand and how deep their roots are in moto. So they've really drawn on all that expertise and pushed that into a mountain bike system. So the 2-piston brakes, which are the F.I.R.S.T, they call from braking brand braking.
Yeah, but mate, you're 100% right. You know, the Italians for years in the bike industry and, you know, moto industry and that have always had a reputation for producing, you know, quality bikes. They also make quality food in Italy as well, quality wine. You know, they definitely go that extra mile as far as quality goes, and these brakes are no different.
Making something special. Well, if you're looking to upgrade the performance of your bike, yeah, man, check out the braking brakes, right? F.I.R.S.T, very impressive. We're going to be checking out the 4 pistons as well. Yeah, man, I reckon sounds like you've had a pretty bloody good time.
I'd buy a set, 100%.
Yeah, right. Well, that is obviously the last point we got tired to try to ask in our reviews is, would you invest in? The answer is yes. So, yeah, pretty impressive brake system there from a very boutique brand. If you're looking for something a little different to the kind of run-of-the-mill brands, definitely worth checking out braking from Italy.
Cheers.